Karen, the HOA president, loses it when I refuse to let her on my property. When I bought my house a few months ago, I was relieved to finally escape the cramped, noisy chaos of apartment living. No more thin walls, no more inconsiderate neighbors blasting music at 2 a.m., no more struggling to find a decent parking spot. Just peace, quiet, and a little patch of land to call my own. The neighborhood seemed nice, quiet, well-kept, and full of homeowners who mostly kept to themselves. There was just one downside: the HOA. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of a homeowners association, but I figured as long as I paid my dues and followed the basic rules, I'd be fine. What I didn't anticipate was Janet. Janet, the HOA president, was a name that came up a lot when I first moved in. I heard stories from my new neighbors about how she took the HOA rules a little too seriously, sending out violation notices for minor things like slightly overgrown grass or a mailbox that wasn't the approved shade of beige. Some people tried to push back, but she always found a way to make their lives miserable. I made a mental note to stay under her radar. At first, it seemed like I had succeeded. I kept to myself, focused on fixing up the yard, which had been neglected by the previous owner, and avoided unnecessary interactions. I wasn't making major renovations, just small improvements, planting a garden, repairing the fence, and clearing out weeds. Nothing that should have attracted attention. But of course it did. One afternoon as I was watering my plants, I heard an abrupt knock, knock, knock at the door. It was the kind of knock that immediately put you on edge. Sharp, demanding, impatient. I set down the hose, wiped my hands on my jeans, and opened the door. There she was, clipboard in hand, wearing a crisp blouse and a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello there," she chirped, her tone unnaturally sweet. "I'm Janet, president of the HOA. I just need to do a quick inspection of your property." I frowned, caught off guard. "A what?" She gestured vaguely with her clipboard, as if that explained everything. "Just a routine check. I need to inspect your garden, fence, and a few other things to ensure everything is up to HOA standards." I stared at her for a moment. "I'm not part of the HOA." I folded my arms. "That's not how it works. I read my contract before I bought this house. I was never required to join." Her expression shifted into something closer to disbelief. "Well, regardless, community standards have to be maintained. I have the right to inspect properties within the neighborhood." I felt my patience wearing thin. "No, you don't. This is my property. You don't have any authority here, and I'm not obligated to let you in." Her face turned an alarming shade of red. "You can't just refuse an inspection. What do you think this is? Some kind of free-for-all? You need to comply." I let out a short laugh. "No, you need to leave." Her mouth opened and closed a few times, as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. Finally, she huffed, flipping through the papers on her clipboard, as if she'd magically find a rule that forced me to obey her. When she came up empty-handed, she shot me one last glare. "This isn't over," she snapped. I shrugged. "Sure feels like it is." She turned on her heel and stormed off down my driveway. As I watched her go, I couldn't help but shake my head. I knew this wouldn't be the last time I had to deal with Janet. But one thing was certain: I wasn't about to let her push me around. I stood my ground, folding my arms as I met Janet's glare. "I don't have to do anything, and you don't have the authority to come onto my property without permission." Janet's lips pressed into a thin line. She clicked her pen aggressively, pretending to take notes like she was documenting some serious violation. "Well, we'll see about that," she huffed. "I'll be back, and you won't be getting away with this." Without another word, she spun on her heel and stomped off, her high heels clacking against the pavement. I watched her go, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. I knew people like Janet didn't just let things go. She saw herself as the queen of this neighborhood, and in her mind, I had just committed treason. I expected some pettiness, maybe an occasional passive-aggressive email or a warning slipped into my mailbox. But Janet? She escalated things immediately. The next morning, I found a bright yellow violation notice taped to my front door. I sighed before even reading it. Sure enough, it was a laundry list of supposed infractions: improper fence placement, garden overgrowth, plants exceeding the approved height. It even threatened fines for noncompliance. The whole thing was ridiculous, especially since I wasn't even part of the HOA. I pulled the notice off and read it twice just to be sure I wasn't imagining things, then shook my head and snapped a picture. If Janet thought I was just going to roll over, she was in for a surprise. I forwarded the picture to my lawyer, Carl. Carl was the kind of guy who didn't put up with nonsense, and he confirmed what I already knew. Janet had no real authority over me. "She's trying to intimidate you," he said flatly. "Ignore the notice, but keep a record of everything. If she keeps pushing, we'll handle it legally." That should have been the end of it. I figured she'd realize she had no power here and move on to harass someone else. But, of course, Janet wasn't the type to take no for an answer. A few days passed, and I continued fixing up my yard, determined not to let her pettiness get to me. That's when things started getting weird. I noticed Janet's car passing by more often than usual. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe she just drove this way a lot. But then I saw her slow down in front of my house, staring intently at my yard before speeding off again. The next time I was outside watering my plants, I spotted her across the street, parked with her phone raised, taking pictures of my property. She wasn't even trying to be discreet. I let out an annoyed sigh and waved at her. The moment she realized I'd caught her, she jerked her head away and quickly drove off. Seriously, this woman had way too much time on her hands. Enough was enough. I called Carl again and explained what had been happening. He let out a frustrated sigh on the other end of the line. "Install security cameras," he advised. "If she keeps this up, we might have a case for harassment." That same day, I ordered a set of cameras and installed them around my property. I wasn't about to play Janet's game, but I also wasn't going to let her harass me unchecked. And just when I thought things couldn't get more ridiculous, I received a formal letter from the HOA. The letter demanded that I attend an upcoming HOA meeting to discuss my violations and address the state of my property. It even threatened legal action if I failed to comply. I laughed out loud. Was she serious? She really thought she could force me into attending her little power trip of a meeting? I was done playing nice. Instead of just ignoring the letter, I drafted a response of my own. I made it crystal clear. I was not and never had been a member of the HOA. I had no legal obligation to attend any meetings. If Janet continued to harass me, I would be filing a formal complaint against her. To drive my point home, I attached copies of her violation notice, the photos I had taken of her taking pictures of my property, and the documentation I had been keeping of her repeated harassment. I sealed the envelope and mailed it off with a sense of satisfaction. But I knew Janet wouldn't back down easily. She had crossed a line, and I was more than ready to show her she couldn't just bully people into submission. This wasn't over. For the first time in weeks, things were quiet. No threats, no slow-moving cars, no Janet. I checked my security cameras daily, half expecting to catch her snooping again. But nothing. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally backed off. Then one morning, I found my backyard gate wide open. The lock had been cut. My stomach dropped. Someone had been here, and I had a damn good idea of who it was. I called Carl immediately. "This is it," he said. "File a police report now." I did just that. The officer took my statement, reviewed my footage, and confirmed the gate had been tampered with. No direct proof it was her, he admitted, but I'd keep an eye out. Then, like clockwork, a letter from the HOA arrived. Janet demanded I attend a meeting. My blood boiled. This woman had trespassed on my property and now she wanted to drag me into her domain? Fine. I gathered everything, letters, photos, security footage, and walked into that meeting ready. Janet wasted no time. She stood up, smirking, and went on about my violations and how I was causing conflict. I let her talk. Then I stood. "I'm not part of this HOA, and I never agreed to follow its rules," I said, voice steady. "Janet has been harassing me, trespassing, and even cutting the lock on my property." Murmurs filled the room. Janet's smug look faltered. "You can't prove," she started. "I have security footage," I cut in. "Want to see it?" Silence. Her face turned red. I turned to the board. This isn't about HOA rules. It's about control. Janet has manipulated this HOA for years. I have proof. Janet's been profiting off the HOA, backdoor deals, shady contracts. We have enough to file a formal complaint. We wasted no time. The next day, we took our evidence straight to the board. A special meeting was called. This time, Janet wasn't leading it. She was the subject of it. Emails, contracts, HOA funds being funneled into her personal interests. It was all there. When the final vote was cast, it was unanimous. Janet was out. For the first time in months, I felt free. No threats, no harassment, no Janet. She vanished from the neighborhood soon after. Some said she moved, others said she went into hiding. But I knew one thing for sure. Wherever she was still seething. And if she ever tried coming back, I'd be ready.